The rain had been falling for hours. Soft, steady, like the sky itself was grieving. Michael Grant stood beneath the stone archway of the memorial garden. Watching the water bead and roll down the smooth marble surface, his breath formed small clouds in the cold October air. 23 years he'd been a palace guard. 23 years of silence, discipline, and duty. But nothing in all that time had prepared him for what he was about to witness. It was nearly midnight. The memorial garden was supposed to be empty, closed, secured. Michael had checked the locks himself an hour ago. But now, through the sheets of rain, he saw a figure moving near the fountain. A woman, dressed in dark clothing. Her silhouette elegant even in the darkness. His hand went to his radio. Protocol demanded he call it in immediately. Trespasser in the memorial garden. Security breach. But something made him pause. The way she moved. Slow. Deliberate. Not like someone trying to hide. Like someone who had every right to be there. Michael stepped closer, his boots silent on the wet stone. The woman was kneeling now in front of the memorial plaque. The one with Diana's name engraved in gold letters. The flowers left by visitors earlier that day were still there, wilting in the rain. Roses. White lilies. Photographs wrapped in plastic. If you're feeling the tension already, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss where this story goes. The woman reached forward, her hands steady despite the cold. Michael's heart began to race. Was she placing something? Taking something. He moved behind a column, close enough now to see more clearly. The woman's hair was pinned back, streaks of gray catching the dim garden lights. Her coat was expensive, tailored. This was no ordinary trespasser. Then she did something that made Michael's blood run cold. She picked up one of the framed photographs. A picture of Diana, smiling, radiant. The kind of image the whole world had seen 1,000 times. But this woman didn't just look at it. She held it close to her chest. For a long moment, she stayed perfectly still. And then, with movements so careful, they seemed rehearsed. She slipped the photograph into her coat. Michael felt his pulse hammering in his ears. He'd seen theft before. Vandalism. Protests. But this was different. This felt personal, intimate, wrong in a way he couldn't quite name. He should stop her. He knew that. It was his job, his duty. But his feet wouldn't move, because in that moment, as the woman stood and turned slightly toward the light, Michael saw her face, and his entire world shifted. It was Camilla, the queen consort, standing alone in the pouring rain, at Diana's memorial, removing a photograph that didn't belong to her. The questions crashed through Michael's mind like thunder. Why was she here? Why alone? Why in secret? And why, after all these years, was she taking something from this place? Camilla stood motionless for another moment, her hand pressed against her coat where the photograph now rested. Then she glanced around, as if sensing she wasn't alone. Michael pulled back into the shadows, his heart racing. When he looked again, she was walking away. Slowly, her head bowed against the rain. Michael stood frozen. Every instinct screamed at him to report what he'd seen, to call his supervisor, to follow protocol. But something deeper, something human, held him back. He'd just witnessed something that wasn't meant to be seen. A private moment. A secret, and secrets in the palace, Michael knew too well, were dangerous things. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat in his small flat on the palace grounds, staring at the wall, replaying every second in his mind. The rain, the memorial. Camilla's face in the dim light, the way she'd held that photograph like it was made of glass. By morning, the story had already begun eating at him. He'd kept secrets before. That was part of the job. You saw things, heard things, and you buried them deep. But this felt different. This felt like standing on the edge of something much bigger than himself. At the morning briefing, Michael's supervisor barely looked up from his clipboard. Standard patrol assignments. Gate rotations. Nothing unusual. No mention of the memorial garden. No questions about the night before. Michael opened his mouth twice, nearly spoke, and then closed it again. What would he even say? That he'd seen the Queen Consort doing something that wasn't technically illegal, but felt deeply wrong. That he'd watched and done nothing. The other guards talked about football, about their families, normal things. Michael nodded along, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. 3 days passed, then 4. Michael returned to his regular duties. Gate patrol in the morning, garden rounds in the afternoon. Every time he walked past the memorial, he felt a twist in his stomach. The photograph hadn't been replaced. The empty space where it had been was barely noticeable, just a small gap among dozens of other tributes. Most people wouldn't even see it, but Michael saw it, and he couldn't stop seeing it. On the 5th day, something changed. Michael was standing at the east gate when a black car pulled up. Official government plates. The window rolled down, and a woman in a gray suit leaned out. She had sharp eyes and a folder in her lap. "Michael Grant?" she asked, though she clearly already knew. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Catherine Wells, Palace Affairs Office. I need a moment of your time." Michael's heart dropped. This was it. Someone had reviewed the security footage. Someone new. He followed her to a small office he'd never been inside before. Plain walls. A desk, 2 chairs. Catherine sat and opened her folder without ceremony. "You were on duty at the Memorial Garden 6 nights ago," she said. "Not a question?" "Yes, ma'am." "Did you see anything unusual?" Michael's throat went dry. This was the moment. Tell the truth and potentially create an international scandal. Lie and betray everything he'd been trained to uphold. He thought of Camilla's face, the way she'd held that photograph, the grief that had been written in every line of her posture. "Nothing unusual," he said quietly. Catherine studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were cold, calculating. Then she closed the folder. "Cameras were malfunctioning that night," she said. "Technical issue. The footage is corrupted. We can't see anything from that evening." Michael nodded slowly. The message was clear. Whatever he'd seen, it didn't exist on record. And that meant someone very powerful wanted it to stay that way. Sometimes, Catherine continued, loyalty means knowing when to speak, and when not to. She stood, smoothing her suit. "You're a good guard, Michael. That's noted in your file. Let's keep it that way." After she left, Michael sat alone in the empty office. His hands were shaking. The palace had just given him a choice. Stay silent and be protected. Speak and face consequences he couldn't even imagine. But that wasn't what disturbed him most. What disturbed him was the question Catherine hadn't asked. She hadn't asked what he'd seen. She'd only asked if he'd seen something unusual, which meant she already knew. They all knew, and they were watching him to see what he would do about it. That evening, Michael found an envelope slipped under his apartment door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed him standing in the shadows of the Memorial Garden, visible just barely in the frame. The timestamp read the same night. Someone had been watching him watch her. The message was unmistakable. * Michael burned the photograph. Held it over his kitchen sink and watched the edges curl and blacken until there was nothing left but ash. But he couldn't burn what it represented. The warning. The threat. The knowledge that powerful eyes were tracking his every move. He went to work the next morning like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Every corridor felt like it had ears. Every shadow seemed to hide someone watching. Michael had served the palace faithfully for over 2 decades, and now he felt like a prisoner in the place he'd sworn to protect. 2 weeks passed in tense silence. Michael kept his head down, did his job, spoke to no one about what he'd seen. He started to think maybe it was over. Maybe they'd determined he wasn't. Threat? Then the invitation arrived. It came on Palace. Stationary. Formal. Embossed. A. Request for Michael to attend a private meeting. In the Queen Consort's study at 4 o'clock that afternoon. No explanation. No context. Just the time and place, and a signature he recognized from official documents. Michael's hands trembled as he read it. Why would Camilla want to see him? Did she know that he knew? Was this some kind of confrontation? Or something worse? At 3:45, Michael stood outside the study, his uniform pressed and perfect, his mind racing through 1,000 scenarios. None of them ended well. A staff member opened the door and gestured him inside. The room was smaller than he'd imagined. Warm books lined the walls. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and there, sitting in a chair near the window, was Camilla. She looked tired. Older than she appeared in official photographs, human in a way that felt almost shocking. "Mr. Grant," she said softly, "please sit." Michael sat, his back straight, his hands folded. Every inch the professional guard. But inside, his heart was pounding like a drum. Camilla studied him for a long moment. Then she did something he'd never expected. She smiled. Not the practiced smile from public appearances. A real one. Sad and genuine. "You saw me," she said. Not a question. A statement, "Yes, ma'am." "And you said nothing?" "No, ma'am." She nodded slowly. Looked toward the window where rain was starting to fall again. London rain. Constant gray. The kind that made everything feel heavier. "Do you know why I took the photograph?" she asked. Michael hesitated. "No, ma'am." Camilla reached into a drawer beside her chair. She pulled out the photograph. Diana's face smiled up at them. Frozen in time. Forever young. Forever radiant. "This picture," Camilla said, "was taken on a day I'll never forget. June 1993. A charity event for children's hospitals. Diana and I both attended." She traced a finger along the edge of the frame. "We barely spoke that day. We barely spoke most days back then. But there was a moment, just one, where we stood together and watched a little girl receive her treatment. And Diana looked at me, really looked at me. And for just a second, there was no rivalry, no competition. Just two women who understood what it meant to live in a cage made of cameras and expectations." Camilla's voice cracked slightly. She cleared her throat and continued. "That photograph was taken right after that moment. I didn't know it existed until 3 weeks ago when someone left it at the memorial. With a note." She pulled out a small piece of paper. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. It said, "She forgave you. But did you forgive yourself?" Michael felt his chest tighten. This wasn't what he'd expected. Not anger. Not scandal. Just pain. Raw and real. "I don't sleep well, Mr. Grant," Camilla said. "I haven't for many years. And when I saw that photograph and that note, something inside me broke. I needed it. I needed to take it somewhere private. Somewhere I could look at it without the world watching. Without judgment. Without cameras." She looked at him directly. "Does that make me a thief?" Michael didn't know what to say. The silence stretched between them. "You could have reported me," she continued. "You should have, by protocol. But you didn't. Why?" Michael took a breath. "Because," he said carefully, "what I saw wasn't a crime, ma'am. It was grief." Camilla's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, but Michael had seen them. The room fell silent except for the soft crackle of the fire. Camilla looked down at the photograph in her hands, and for a moment, Michael saw past the title, past the crown, past everything the world thought they knew about her. He saw a woman carrying a weight no one else could see. "They hate me, you know," Camilla said quietly. "The public. They always have. They see me as the villain in a fairy tale. The woman who destroyed their princess." She set the photograph on the table between them. "And perhaps they're right. Perhaps I am exactly what they think I am," Ma'am Michael started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. Please." She took a breath. Diana was extraordinary. Truly, she had a light that drew people in, made them love her instantly. And I was never meant to compete with that. But I did. Not by choice, just by existing. She paused. "Do you know what that's like, Mr. Grant? To be cast as someone's enemy when all you wanted was to live your life?" Michael thought about his own life. Small, quiet, uncomplicated. Oh, I can't imagine. Diana and I, Camilla continued, we were never friends. But we were never the enemies the press made us out to be either. We were just two women trapped in impossible circumstances, both loving the same man, both trying to survive a system that wanted to break us. She picked up the photograph again. When she died, I grieved. Not publicly. I couldn't. Grieved. For her sons. For everything that would never be. Michael listened, barely breathing. This was confession. Real and unfiltered. That note, Camilla said, the one left with the photograph, it asked if I'd forgiven myself. And the truth is, I haven't. I carry it every day. The guilt. The what-ifs. The knowledge that the world sees me as the reason she suffered. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. But taking that photograph wasn't about stealing. It was about remembering that one moment when we were just two human beings, when there was no crown, no scandal, just understanding. Michael felt something shift in his chest. All his life he'd seen the royals as untouchable, separate, different, but sitting here, listening to Camilla speak with such raw honesty, he realized they were just as trapped as anyone. Maybe more. Why are you telling me this? He asked gently. Camilla smiled again, that same sad smile. Because you could have destroyed me, and you chose not to. Because in 23 years of service, your file shows a man of integrity. And because, she hesitated, I needed to tell someone. To speak it out loud to another human being, not a staff member bound by employment, not family bound by loyalty, but someone who saw what happened and chose mercy over protocol. She stood and walked to the window. The rain was heavier now, drumming against the glass like fingers tapping. I'm returning the photograph to the memorial tomorrow, Camilla said. Publicly. I'll place it back myself. There will be cameras, questions. I'll tell them I was visiting privately and noticed it had fallen, that I took it for safekeeping to have it properly preserved. She turned to face him. It's a lie. But it's the lie that protects everyone. The memorial's dignity, the palace's reputation, and your career? You don't have to do that, Michael said. Yes, I do. Camilla's voice was firm now. Because secrets like this, they grow. They fester. They turn into something worse. Better to control the narrative now than let it control us later. She walked back to her chair. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Grant. What you saw that night was real. My pain was real. My grief was real. The world will see a carefully staged photograph opportunity tomorrow, but you will know the truth. Michael nodded slowly. I understand, ma'am. Do you? She leaned forward. Because once tomorrow happens, you can never speak about what really occurred. Not to anyone. Not ever. Can you live with that? Michael thought about the envelope. The photograph of him in the shadows. The palace's power to destroy careers, reputations, lives, but he also thought about the woman sitting across from him. Flawed, human, trying to do right by a ghost that still haunted her. I can live with it, he said. Camilla studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. One more thing, Mr. Grant. When you saw me that night, you saw someone at their lowest. Someone breaking protocol. Someone being weak. She met his eyes. But you showed me kindness. That's rare in this world. Especially in these walls. Michael stood and gave a small bow. As he reached the door, Camilla spoke again. Mr. Grant. The envelope you received. The photograph of you. I didn't authorize that. Michael turned, confused. Asterisk Michael's blood ran cold. Ma'am. The photograph of you in the garden, Camilla repeated. The one slipped under your door. That wasn't from me. I didn't know you'd been there until palace security reviewed the corrupted footage and saw your figure in the frame. They brought it to my attention. But by then, you'd already received that envelope. Someone else is watching, Mr. Grant, and they wanted you to know it. Michael's mind raced. If it wasn't Camilla, and it wasn't official palace security, then who and why? I don't understand, he said. Neither do I, but I wanted you to be careful. Camilla's expression was grave. Whatever game is being played, you're a piece on the board now. And in this palace, that's a dangerous place to be.
Well,
Michael left the study in a daze. The corridors seemed longer than before. Every face he passed felt suspicious. Every corner could hide someone with a camera, a recorder, a hidden agenda. He'd thought the meeting would bring clarity. Instead, it had opened a door to something darker. That night, Michael barely slept. He kept replaying Camilla's words. Someone else is watching. But who? And why send him that warning? To scare him? To control him? Or to pull him into something bigger? The next morning came gray and cold. Michael arrived early for his shift, but the palace was already buzzing with activity. Television crews, photographers, staff members rushing through hallways with clipboards and headsets. Something was happening. At 10 o'clock, Michael was assigned to security detail at the Memorial Garden. His supervisor gave him the position without explanation, but the look in the man's eyes said everything. This was intentional. Someone wanted Michael there for what was about to happen. The press arrived first. A dozen cameras. Reporters checking their microphones. Then palace staff set up barriers, creating a path from the east entrance to the memorial fountain. Michael stood at his post, watching it all unfold, his stomach tight with anticipation. At 10:30, Camilla emerged. She wore a dark coat and a simple scarf. No crown, no jewelry. She looked smaller than she had in the study. More vulnerable. The cameras immediately came alive, flashing and clicking like mechanical insects. Michael watched as she walked slowly to the memorial. In her hands, she carried the photograph. Diana's face visible, even from a distance. The press pushed forward, questions flying. Your Majesty, why are you here today? Is this a special commemoration? Can you tell us about the photograph? Camilla ignored them all. She knelt at the memorial, her movements careful and deliberate. She placed the photograph back among the flowers and tributes. For a moment she stayed there, her head bowed. The cameras captured every second. Tomorrow, it would be on every front page. Every news site, the Queen Consort honoring Diana's memory, a gesture of respect, of reconciliation. But Michael knew the truth. This wasn't reconciliation. This was protection. A carefully constructed story to bury the real one. Camilla stood and turned to the press. She gave a brief statement. She'd been visiting privately earlier in the week and noticed this particular photograph had been damaged by weather. She'd taken it to be restored and was now returning it. She spoke about Diana's legacy, about remembrance, about moving forward while honoring the past. It was perfect, polished, exactly what the world wanted to hear. The press ate it up. Questions shifted from suspicious to sympathetic. The narrative was set. By evening, the headlines would praise her gesture. By tomorrow, it would be old news. And the truth of that rainy midnight visit would be buried forever. As the press conference ended and Camilla began to leave, something happened that no one expected. A woman broke through the barriers. Young, maybe 30. She was crying, pushing past security, reaching toward Camilla. Please, the woman shouted. Please, I need to talk to you. Guards moved in immediately, but Camilla held up a hand, stopping them. Michael tensed, ready to intervene, but something in Camilla's face made him pause. It's all right, Camilla said quietly. She looked at the woman. What is it? The woman was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I'm the one who left the photograph, she said. I'm the one who wrote the note. The world seemed to stop. Every camera turned toward the woman. Every reporter leaned in. Michael felt his pulse hammering. This wasn't in the script. This was chaos. My mother, the woman continued, voice breaking. She worked with Princess Diana at the hospital charity. She died 2 years ago. And before she passed, she gave me that photograph. She said Diana had given it to her. Said it was a reminder that even people who seem like enemies can find moments of grace. She looked directly at Camilla. My mother wanted you to have it. She said you'd understand why. Camilla stood perfectly still. Michael could see the emotions warring on her face. Shock, confusion, and something else. Something that looked like hope. "What was your mother's name?" Camilla asked softly. "Sarah Bennett. She was a nurse." Camilla closed her eyes. "I remember her." A crowd held its breath. The memorial garden was silent except for the sound of camera shutters. Camilla opened her eyes and looked at the young woman with an expression Michael had never seen before. Raw recognition. Memory flooding back. "Sarah," Camilla said softly. She had red hair. Always wore it in a braid. She made Diana laugh once, told her a joke about hospital food that was so terrible it was brilliant. A small smile touched her lips. Diana couldn't stop giggling. I remember thinking I'd never heard her laugh like that. So genuine. The young woman nodded, tears still streaming. "That was her." "That was my mom." Camilla stepped forward, breaking every protocol, and took the woman's hands in her own. "Your mother was kind. To everyone." Diana spoke of her fondly, and if she wanted me to have that photograph, then— She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "Then I'm honored. Truly." Michael watched, transfixed. This wasn't staged. This wasn't palace management. This was real human connection happening in front of the world's cameras, and no one knew quite what to do with it. I left the note because— The young woman continued. "My mom said you both carried such heavy burdens, that people expected you to be villains or saints, but never just women." She said Diana understood that, and she thought maybe if you saw that photograph, you'd remember that too. Camilla's composure cracked. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "Your mother was wiser than any of us," she said. "Thank you. For trusting me with this, for reminding me of something I'd forgotten." The press was going wild. This was the story of the year, the decade. The Queen Consort and Princess Diana's memory brought together by a dying woman's wish. The narrative had just been rewritten in real time, and no amount of palace control could contain it now. Security gently guided the young woman away. But Camilla held onto her hands until the last possible moment. Then she turned to the cameras, composed herself, and gave a final statement. "Sometimes," she said, "the past comes back to teach us what we failed to learn the first time. Today I was reminded that Diana's legacy isn't about rivalry or regret. It's about compassion, understanding, and the bridges we can build even after we think it's too late." She glanced back at the memorial. Sarah Bennett gave her daughter a gift, and today that daughter gave one to me. The gift of perspective. The gift of peace. She didn't take questions. She simply walked away, leaving the press and the public to make of it what they would. Michael stood at his post long after everyone else had left. The garden was quiet again. Just him and the memorial and the photograph that had started everything. He thought about Camilla's midnight visit, about the young woman's revelation, about how a single moment of grief had spiraled into something none of them could have predicted. That evening, Michael returned to his apartment and found another envelope. His heart sank. Not again. Not more warnings. But when he opened it, there was no photograph inside. Just a handwritten note. "Mr. Grant, thank you for your discretion and your humanity. What you witnessed was a woman at her most vulnerable. What you showed was grace. The photograph you received previously came from Palace Security Attest to ensure you could be trusted. You passed. With gratitude, C." Michael read it 3 times. Then he carefully folded it and placed it in his drawer. So it had been a test, the palace's way of determining if he was loyal. If he could keep secrets, if he understood the unspoken rules of the game, he'd passed. But at what cost? He knew now that everything in the palace was calculated. Every moment watched. Every action measured. Even kindness could be a strategy. Over the following weeks, the story took on a life of its own. The media praised Camilla's gesture. Sarah Bennett's daughter was interviewed on morning shows. The photograph became a symbol of reconciliation, of healing old wounds, moving forward. Michael saw the palace's hand in all of it. The careful messaging, The strategic interviews. The way the narrative shifted from scandal to redemption. They'd taken chaos and molded it into exactly what they needed. But Michael also knew something the public didn't. He knew that beneath all the polish and planning, there had been a real moment. A real woman kneeling in the rain, holding a photograph, carrying the weight of decades. That was the truth that would never make headlines. 6 months later, Michael was promoted. A better position. More responsibility. It came with a handwritten note from Camilla's office, congratulating him and thanking him for his years of service. Nothing in it referenced that night or the photograph. Nothing that could ever be traced back. But Michael understood. This was his reward for silence, for loyalty. For understanding how to play the game, he accepted the promotion. He continued his work. He kept his mouth shut. But sometimes, on rainy nights, Michael would walk past the memorial garden. He'd see the tributes left by visitors from around the world. Flowers, photographs, messages of love and loss. And there, among them all, was the photograph. Still in its place, still showing Diana's radiant smile, still holding secrets only a handful of people would ever know. Michael would stand there for a moment, remembering. Then he'd continue his rounds, a silent guardian of secrets he could never tell. In the palace, he'd learned the most powerful stories were the ones that never got told, the ones that lived only in memory, the ones that shaped lives from the shadows. And this was his story now. A story of a rainy night, a grieving woman, and a choice between duty and compassion. A story that, like so many others behind palace walls, would remain forever in the dark, where perhaps it belonged.